Rain poured over the massive glass mansion like the heavens themselves were mourning. The Delacroix estate stood on the outskirts of New York, a palace of silver and light, its marble floors too perfect to reflect the brokenness that hid within. Inside, servants moved quietly, each step measured, each breath cautious, because their employer, Evelyn Delacroix, the cold billionaire widow, didn't tolerate imperfection. That evening, Evelyn sat at her long oak dining table, swirling a glass of red wine. Her sharp eyes studied the candle flame like it owed her something. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and old memories she didn't dare revisit. Behind her, her butler, Mr. Harris, spoke softly. "Ma'am, the new maid has arrived." Evelyn didn't look up. "What's her name?" "Lila, ma'am. She's from, well, she's had a difficult past." Evelyn's lip curved into a faint smirk. "They all have, Harris. That's why they work for me." Moments later, Lila stepped into the room, her clothes clean but old, her nervous fingers clutching the hem of her apron. She couldn't have been more than 22. Her dark hair was tied back in a rough bun, her eyes a deep shade of brown, filled with a quiet strength she didn't know she had. Evelyn looked up briefly and froze, not out of recognition, but something unexplainable. For a fraction of a second, her heartbeat stuttered. Something about that girl, the way she held her chin, the tremor in her voice when she said, "Good evening, ma'am." It felt familiar. But Evelyn brushed it off. "You'll start with the East Wing," she said coldly. "And remember, no mistakes. I have no patience for incompetence." Lila nodded, whispering, "Yes, ma'am," before disappearing down the corridor. The next few days unfolded in quiet misery. The mansion was endless, filled with locked rooms, portraits of people long gone, and a silence so deep it felt haunted. Lila worked from dawn to late night, polishing floors and carrying laundry, while the other servants whispered about her. "She won't last a week," one of them muttered. "Mrs. Delacroix hates everyone new. But that girl, there's something about her face. Doesn't she look like someone?" Lila didn't listen. She wasn't there to make friends. She needed the job. Her mother, well, the woman who'd raised her, had died 3 months ago. The bills had piled up. Lila had no one left, no home, no dreams, only a single photograph she kept hidden in her locket. A smiling woman holding a baby in front of a small cottage. The woman in the picture was her mother, or so she thought. One evening, Lila entered Evelyn's study with a tray of tea. Evelyn was seated near the fireplace, reading an old leathered journal. The air smelled of cedar and loneliness. "Set it there," she said without looking up. Lila obeyed quietly, but her eyes lingered on the photos lining the mantel. One in particular caught her attention. A younger Evelyn holding a baby girl wrapped in a white blanket. The baby's face was soft and radiant, her eyes a deep brown. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Evelyn said suddenly, her voice sharp. Lila startled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to stare." Evelyn sighed, closing the journal. "That was my daughter, Amelia. She disappeared 20 years ago, taken from me at a train station. I never saw her again." The words pierced the air like glass breaking. Lila's heart ached, not knowing why. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she whispered. Evelyn nodded stiffly. "Sorry doesn't change the past. Go." Lila left quickly, her throat tight. That night, she lay in her tiny servant's room staring at the ceiling, her hand unconsciously gripping the locket at her neck. The baby in Evelyn's photograph looked eerily familiar. Could it be? No. She shook the thought away. Impossible. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn's temper grew harsher, her loneliness deeper. She lashed out at anyone who came too close, and Lila became her favorite target. "You call this clean?" Evelyn snapped one morning, throwing a vase against the wall. "You useless girl." "I'm sorry, ma'am," Lila said, trembling. "I'll do better." "You'll never do better," Evelyn hissed, turning away. "You're all the same, poor, desperate, and pitiful." The words burned, but Lila said nothing. She'd learned that silence was safer than truth. Later that evening, Evelyn's old friend and business partner, Dr. Vincent Hale, visited. He was a calm, gray-haired man who had known Evelyn before the tragedy that hardened her heart. Over dinner, he noticed Lila serving them and frowned thoughtfully. "Evelyn," he said quietly when Lila left the room, "that girl, Lila, where did you find her?" "Through the agency." "Why?" "She looks familiar," he said. "Almost like—" He trailed off, unsure if he should finish. "Like who?" Evelyn demanded. He hesitated. "Like Amelia." Evelyn laughed bitterly. "Don't be ridiculous. Amelia would be 22 now. That girl is just another lost soul." But later, when Evelyn retired to her room, she couldn't shake the thought. She poured herself another glass of wine and stared at her reflection. Like Amelia. The words echoed. She told herself it was nonsense, yet something deep within, something maternal, forgotten, whispered otherwise. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Evelyn entered the parlor unexpectedly and found Lila dusting one of the old piano shelves. Her locket had fallen open as she bent down, the small photograph glinting in the light. "What's that?" Evelyn asked sharply. Lila gasped and tried to close it. "It's just my mother, ma'am." Evelyn stepped closer, snatching the locket before Lila could react. Her eyes scanned the tiny image and froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The woman in the picture, she wasn't some stranger. It was her, younger, smiling, holding her baby in the garden behind the old Delacroix estate. For a moment, her entire world tilted. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. Lila stammered. It was my mother's, ma'am. She gave it to me before she died." "Your mother's name?" Evelyn's voice was shaking. Margaret Lane." Evelyn's hand trembled. Margaret Lane. That was the name of the nanny who vanished the same day Amelia was taken. She staggered back, clutching the locket like it burned her. "Get out," she whispered. "Ma'am?" "I said, get out! Everything out of my house, now!" The echo of the slammed door lingered long after Lila's footsteps disappeared into the rain. Evelyn sank to her knees, shaking, the locket still clutched in her fist. Her heart thundered, her mind spinning with denial and buried memories. Because deep down, behind all the years of grief and pride, something inside her already knew the truth. The night swallowed the Delacroix mansion whole. Outside, thunder rolled over the estate as Lila stumbled down the long gravel driveway, rain soaking her thin uniform, suitcase dragging behind her like a burden she didn't deserve. Each drop felt like punishment, cold, relentless, merciless. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The image of Evelyn's face, twisted with anger and disbelief, was burned into her memory. Lila whispered through tears, Why would she think I stole it?" She had no answers, only confusion and the echo of her own footsteps vanishing into the storm. By the time she reached the bus station, she was shivering. She sat under the flickering light, clutching the locket close to her chest. Her fingers traced the edges of the photograph, the only connection she had left to her past. She didn't know that, miles away, in her grand mansion, Evelyn Delacroix hadn't slept either. Evelyn paced her study like a ghost, trapped between guilt and pride. The rain drummed against the windows as she poured another glass of wine with trembling hands. On the desk before her lay the open locket. That face, Margaret's gentle smile, the baby in her arms, it was all too clear now. Evelyn's breath came shallow. She remembered that day 2 decades ago, when everything had fallen apart. She'd been traveling with baby Amelia and her nanny, Margaret, when the train station erupted into chaos, a fire alarm, crowds pushing, screams. And when it was over, the stroller was empty. Margaret and the baby, gone. For years, Evelyn had believed Margaret had kidnapped her daughter. The police found nothing. The case went cold. Evelyn's husband drank himself into an early grave, and she turned her grief into steel. But now, staring at that locket, she realized something horrifying. What if Margaret hadn't run away? What if she'd saved the baby and something had gone wrong? Her voice broke as she whispered, "Amelia!" She sank into the armchair, clutching the locket to her heart. But even as her tears fell, another voice, cold and familiar, rose inside her. "Don't be foolish. That girl could have found this anywhere. You're seeing ghosts." And yet the feeling wouldn't leave her. The curve of Lila's jaw, the way her eyes softened when she spoke, it was as if she had been looking at her younger self in another life. The next morning, Evelyn called for Mr. Harris. "She's gone, ma'am," he said quietly, removing his hat. "Packed her things last night." Evelyn stared out the window. "Did she say where she was going?" "No, ma'am, but I think she left her paycheck behind." He placed a small envelope on the desk. Evelyn's eyes fell on it and froze. Inside, folded neatly, was a piece of paper, a note written in delicate handwriting. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mrs. Delacroix. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Please forgive me if I've disappointed you. Lila." Her throat tightened. No anger, no blame, only sorrow and gratitude. The kind of kindness only innocence could write. Evelyn whispered to herself, "What have I done?" 3 days passed. The mansion felt emptier than ever. Even the servants moved slower, as though the storm had stolen the soul of the house. Evelyn couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lila standing in the rain, crying, confused, her own daughter, cast away twice in one lifetime. Finally, Evelyn did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed. She knelt by the fireplace, whispering words to a God she had long abandoned. "If she truly is my Amelia, bring her back to me, please, just once." The very next morning, Dr. Vincent Hale returned. "Evelyn," he said gravely, setting his briefcase on the table, "I ran that background check you asked for, on the girl." Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. "And?" He hesitated. "She was raised in a small town in Vermont. Her mother, Margaret Lane, died recently of illness. There were no official adoption papers. The town's records show the child was found abandoned at a local church when she was a baby. The priest who found her said the woman who left her was badly injured, burned, and died shortly after. The only thing the baby had with her, he opened the briefcase and placed a sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside was a tiny silver bracelet engraved with a single word, Amelia. Evelyn gasped. Her knees gave out. "Oh my God!" Vincent knelt beside her. "Evelyn, it's her. There's no doubt." Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the bracelet to her chest. "I sent her away. I called her a liar." "Then go to her," Vincent said softly. before it's too late. Lila, meanwhile, had found temporary work at a bakery in a quiet town 2 hours away. The owner, a kind widow named Mrs. Green, let her stay in a small room above the shop. Life was simple there: flour, warmth, the smell of bread, but her heart still felt heavy. Some nights she would stand by the window staring at the sky and whisper to the mother she thought she knew, "I wish you could tell me who I really am. I feel so lost, like half of me doesn't exist." Then one afternoon, a black limousine pulled up in front of the bakery. Mrs. Green called from below, "Lila, dear, there's someone here for you." When Lila stepped out, her breath caught. Evelyn Delacroix stood there, wrapped in a cream coat, her hair undone, her eyes red from crying. For the first time, she didn't look like a billionaire. She looked like a woman who had been broken and rebuilt too many times. Lila froze. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I came to apologize. I said terrible things, things you didn't deserve." Lila crossed her arms, defensive but hurt. "You threw me out like trash. Why now?" Because I was wrong." She reached into her purse and pulled out the bracelet, her hands shaking. "This was yours, 20 years ago." Lila stared, confusion turning to disbelief. "Mine? No, I think you're mistaken." Evelyn grabbed her hands, tears falling freely now. "You're not Lila Lane. You're Amelia Delacroix, my daughter." The world went still. Even the wind seemed to stop. Lila's breath hitched, her eyes widened. "What? That's impossible. My mother, she raised me. She saved you," Evelyn said softly. "She must have rescued you from that fire. I thought she took you away from me, but she was protecting you. You were all I had left." Lila shook her head, her mind spinning. "No, you can't be." But then Evelyn opened the locket. Inside was the same photograph Lila had carried her all life, only this one had 2 halves. The other half of the torn picture. The 2 pieces fit perfectly when held together. Lila's breath hitched. The truth hit her like a wave, painful, heavy, beautiful. I'm your daughter?" she whispered. Evelyn nodded, sobbing. "And I'm the mother who failed you twice." Lila stood there frozen, tears blurring her sight. She wanted to scream, to cry, to hug her, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Evelyn reached out slowly, her voice breaking. "Please, Amelia, give me a chance to make it right." For a long moment, Lila said nothing. Then she whispered the name softly, like testing it for the first time. "Amelia." Her mother smiled faintly through tears. "Yes, darling, that was always your name." The 2 women stood there in the quiet afternoon, one broken by guilt, the other by loss, until finally Lila stepped forward and collapsed into Evelyn's arms. The years between them disappeared in a heartbeat. Rain began to fall again, softly this time, like the sky itself was blessing their reunion. The rain had long stopped by the time Evelyn and Lila returned to the mansion. The sky above shimmered pale gold, and for the first time in 20 years, the Delacroix estate didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. But beneath that fragile calm, both women carried storms of their own. Evelyn stood in the grand foyer, her fingers tracing the marble column as if rediscovering her home. "Everything in this house," she said softly, "I built it to forget. But it only reminded me every day of what I lost." Lila looked around quietly. The place that once terrified her now seemed different, softer somehow. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "but it feels lonely." Evelyn smiled faintly. "It was, until now." They shared an awkward silence, both unsure what to do with the new truth between them. Lila's heart wanted to trust, to forgive, but her mind kept replaying the cruelty, the harsh words, the dismissal, the years stolen. Finally, she said, "Why didn't you ever stop looking for me?" Evelyn's shoulders slumped. "I did. For years, I searched. I spent everything, hired every investigator I could find. But after your father died, I lost hope. I became bitter. I thought the world had taken me from me. I never imagined you were out there, growing up under another name." Lila's voice trembled. "You treated me like I was nothing." "I know. And I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But please, let me make it right." Lila looked away, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I don't know how to start." "Then we start small, as strangers, learning to love again." The following weeks unfolded like a quiet healing. Evelyn had the mansion's old garden restored, the same garden where she used to cradle baby Amelia under the lilac tree. Lila, curious, helped plant new flowers. The servants, once fearful, watched in awe as their employer, the woman known for her icy command, now laughed, cried, and worked beside a young woman who looked just like her. Mr. Harris, the butler, was the first to say it out loud. It's as if the house finally found its heartbeat again. Every morning, Lila joined Evelyn for tea. They spoke of small things, at first, the bakery, the weather, favorite books. Slowly, they began to share pieces of their pasts, stitching together years that fate had torn apart. One afternoon, Evelyn took out a dusty photo album. "These are all I have left of your father," she said, flipping the pages. "He would have loved you so much." Lila smiled sadly. "I wish I could remember him." Evelyn touched her hand gently. "You have his eyes." The gesture broke something inside Lila, not in pain, but in release. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she belonged somewhere. But not everyone accepted their reunion easily. When the media discovered that the powerful Evelyn Delacroix had found her long-lost daughter working as a maid, the headlines exploded. "Billionaire heiress found living in poverty. Delacroix scandal, secrets, betrayal, and redemption." Reporters camped outside the gates, shouting questions. Lila became the center of a storm she never asked for. "Mom," she said one morning, the words still new, still fragile, "I can't do this. They're treating me like a story, not a person." Evelyn looked at her with fierce protectiveness. "Then let them talk. The only story that matters is ours." "But they're saying terrible things about Margaret," Lila said softly, "that she was a thief, a kidnapper." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I'll fix that. I'll tell the truth." And she did. At a press conference in front of dozens of flashing cameras, Evelyn stood tall and spoke from her heart. 20 years ago, I lost my daughter and blamed the wrong person. Margaret Lane didn't steal my child, she saved her. I was too blinded by grief to see it. Today I ask forgiveness, not just from my daughter, Amelia, but from the memory of the woman who protected her when I couldn't." Lila looked from the crowd, tears streaming down her face. For the first time she saw not the powerful billionaire, but a mother, human, vulnerable, brave. The room erupted in quiet applause. That night, for the first time in decades, Evelyn slept peacefully. Spring came early that year. One bright morning, Lila wandered through the garden, sunlight spilling through the lilac blossoms. She could hear her mother humming softly on the terrace, something she used to hum when Amelia was a baby. Lila paused under the tree, remembering the first day she'd arrived here, frightened, invisible, unwanted. How strange that the same place now felt like home. "Lost in thought again?" Evelyn's voice came from behind her. Lila turned, smiling. just remembering." Evelyn walked beside her, carrying a small box wrapped in velvet. "Then remember this, too." She handed it over. Inside was the silver bracelet, newly polished, engraved now with 2 words: Amelia, Lila. Lila's breath caught. "You added my name," Evelyn nodded, eyes glistening. "Because you're both, my Amelia and the Lila who survived." Lila threw her arms around her mother. "I love you," she whispered. Evelyn's voice broke. "I love you too, my girl, more than anything." Months passed, and together they began new projects: charities for orphaned children, shelters for single mothers. Evelyn used her fortune not as a shield, but as a bridge. And Lila, once a maid scrubbing the mansion's floors, became the heart of every cause they touched. The world that once pitied her now admired her, but fame meant nothing to her anymore. What mattered was the peace she'd found in forgiveness. Sometimes at night, Lila would stand on the mansion balcony and whisper to the stars, "Thank you, Mom Margaret, for saving me twice, once from the fire and once from the world." And somewhere deep inside, she liked to believe that the wind carried her words to heaven. One evening, Evelyn sat by the piano and began playing softly, a melody from long ago. Lila joined her, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "Do you ever think about the years we lost?" Lila asked quietly. "Every day," Evelyn replied. "But I've learned something, darling. Time can steal moments, but love—" She paused, smiling through tears. "Love can rewrite them." Outside, the first fireflies of summer began to glow, dancing through the garden where it had all begun. Lila looked up at her mother, the woman she once feared, now the one she trusted most, and whispered, "Then let's keep rewriting." And they did. The mansion, once cold and hollow, now pulsed with laughter and light. The echo of sorrow that had haunted its walls for decades faded, replaced by the sound of 2 hearts finally beating in rhythm again. Because sometimes the most beautiful reunions aren't born of perfection, but of forgiveness. And though the world still called her the billionaire's daughter, to Evelyn she would always simply be my Amelia.